Live from the Coachella Valley, time for another hour of the desert scene. Art exhibitions to modernism, music festivals to live theater, big screen, little screen, and very little screen. This is the Culture Corner with Bonnie Gilgallon and Brayan Mendoza. Here's Bonnie and Brayan on iHub Radio.
And welcome to the Culture Corner. Lots and lots of news and guests to talk about today. And I want to start. How you doing, Brayan?
I'm doing good. You're excited about this?
Yes. Meghan and Harry. We've got to talk about that. Wow, such a big story. I have some strong feelings about it. I mean, I think there is. It's not black or white, and I know there's a race issue, but there's shades of gray here. I mean, I don't think anyone is 100% right and no one's 100% wrong. However, I think the royal family is a bunch of spoiled, stuck-up people with arcane rules and regulations, and I think it's probably very tough to be a royal and to live in the palace, especially when you come in, you marry a prince and you're coming in as an American, divorcee, so I think she had a tough time. I think Meghan did have a very tough time as a royal. I think probably they were not as helpful as they could have been to her. And I think Harry's a little bit sort of odd man out because obviously, William's first in line to the throne after Charles. However, I also think that Meghan Markle is a bit spoiled and a little bit of a gold digger. And, you marry a prince, you got to know a little bit of what you're getting into. And then this sort of feeling there, when Harry came in and they were talking about they were cut off from the finances, et cetera. Well, Diana left him $10 million. So they're not starving. They never will be. And she's got a couple million from apparently her acting stuff. So I'm not going to get out the violin for them about money. But I was very disturbed about the race thing and whether or not. I've heard conflicting stories that maybe, yes, he was. They offered Archie a title of Duke or Earl or something. I don't know. But whether or not he was offered a title he should have had. But I do believe someone was concerned about the color of his skin. I have my own opinions about who that was. They said, specifically to Oprah later, it was not the Queen. It was not Philip. It was not the Queen's husband. So for me, my bet is on Charles. I don't know. I wasn't there. But that's very disturbing. And I think there is perhaps a little bit of racist feeling with the royals. So I feel badly to some degree for Meghan and Harry that she was treated badly. But, I'm not getting out my violin. They're in a mansion in L.A. They just signed huge deals with Spotify and Netflix or whatever the hell it was for millions of dollars. They got the kid. So I'm not getting out my violin for them. Okay, I'm done.
Well, there's certainly... I think what I like about what you had to say, though, is that there's a lot of nuance, and I feel like I personally am very supportive of them. Like, I do want to say that my opinion of Meghan Markle is a little bit higher just because I feel like she did speak up. But I also want to point out that this isn't the first time someone has spoken up. And,
that's true.
And the fact that this is something that's been known for years. So I think that Meghan Markle is brave for the circumstances she's in right now.
Agreed.
But I also want to point out that we shouldn't be surprised by the things we hear about the royal family's problems, because believe it or not, the royal family, when you're that big of a family, you're going to have a lot of problems.
Of course.
And it's about public image too, because in every family cares about public image. And so I feel so horrible for Meghan Markle that she had to hear that statement about the color of her son's skin, which is terrible, because it's not surprising to me to hear that, because it's like, well, that family has always been a little apprehensive about outsiders in general.
And yeah.
Because there's one person that, if anything, really did suffer the consequences from the royal family's problems, and that was Diana Spencer.
Of course.
Sorry, Diana, Princess of Wales.
Yeah.
I always say Diana Spencer because I like her name, but I would say Diana, Princess of Wales. She had an interview back then where she talked about how she had concerns about the family.
I remember that. Yeah.
And that interview is still referenced and still talked about. And I feel like maybe the next season of The Crown will bring it up because it's that famous of an interview. This probably will reach that level of notoriety because people will look at it as that's Diana part 2, basically. It's
exactly.
And Meghan Markle is beloved by the people because not only is she very beautiful, which, we got to point out that Meghan Markle and Diana were two very beautiful women. And part of the popularity relates to that, but also because they're approachable in that beauty. Like Diana did not look like, I would say, someone you wouldn't talk to at the store. Like you can go up to Diana and say, hi, how are you doing? And she's very beautiful, but you never felt like she didn't want to talk to you. Yeah. And Meghan Markle radiates similar energy.
Same thing, yeah.
And so for me, this sort of confirms, or at least further opens up the gate to realize that the royal family isn't somebody you need to, a group of people you need to worship. I feel like we need to think critically about their role in British culture, and we also have to think about how that family's drama is reflective of our society's problems, like how we don't accept outsiders. Like Diana is a white woman, but they still treated her as an outsider, and Prince Charles and her had one of the most messiest divorces of the 1990s. And it was one of those things where this drama will keep on coming back in some way or another. Like it came back early last year. We were talking about The Crown and how that whole season had Diana as a character, and this relives this drama. For me, Prince Harry talking about this just sort of shows that he's protecting, because he talked about how he doesn't want history to repeat itself. I
get that, and that was very. You can't blame him for worrying about that.
No, and I certainly feel his pain, because like the fact that Diana died so young and there's still all this conspiracy about it, because I'm sure I'm not going to bring up the conspiracy theories in too much detail, but if you know, and I'm sure he's heard them several times, and that sort of thing gets to you. If everyone's telling you that your grandmother is, somehow involved, it will sour up your relationship. And I think that these tense relationships within the family and with Meghan Markle sort of cement in his idea, like, I gotta protect her in a way that no one protected my mother. And I really respect him a lot for that. Absolutely. But I also want to say that for me, when they were talking about the money situation, I am in agreement with you in that I would say to them, don't bring up the money situation.
They're doing just fine.
You're doing fine with that. I mean, because they were cut off financially, but I'm sure they were aware that Diana's money was going to keep them afloat. And they're famous. Famous people will get deals almost right away.
Deals, whatever, movie, etc. Yeah, exactly. So they're never going to starve. I do want to, one thing that I left out, though, the other thing that concerned me a lot was the mental health issue.
Yes.
And of course, the Queen is, the people are saying, well, there are different recollections about what happened. I don't know. But I tend to agree with Meghan, believe her on that she asked for help, and they said, well, no, that's just not done here. You just suck it up and deal with it. So that's very concerning to me. I've in my life have had issues with depression, so I'm a really strong mental health advocate, and that's very disturbing to me.
I totally forgot about that too, that Meghan Markle was having some mental health problems, and she was told basically to suck it up.
Yeah.
And for me, that it relates to Diana, because when you see that interview, you can tell she went through some stuff and she had to put up this image. And I remember that, funny enough, I'm going to bring up a fictional thing. There was an episode of a TV show called My So-Called Life where a character has a dream sequence with Princess Diana. And at first you kind of laugh it off because, it's so 90s. But then that episode predated the divorce and actually had Diana say, it's just so hard being this perfect princess, and it's just so much, it's draining on me. And when I was looking back at it, because it was in 1995 that this episode came out, I was like, yeah, it is hard to fit that image, because even though they're rich, I think people forget that being rich doesn't exclude people from suffering from real mental issues.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And sometimes to put on an image, they can't go to therapy. And I always encourage therapy, and I'm glad you do too, Bonnie, because the fact is that we have to get people therapy, because we can't live in a society where people who need help don't have access to it
yeah.
or are discouraged from doing so. So if Meghan Markle has to leave that family, if they have to leave in order to get this help, that's great for them. And if this interview was meant a cathartic moment for them, that's great.
And good, yes, yeah. So I agree. I mean, and after it was over, at the minute the interview was over, I have to say I was very, very supportive of them. But then I've seen some things, and I hadn't thought about the fact that they get a lot of money, and so it's a balance. I mean, I'm glad they're out. I'm glad they left. I think that was better for them, and probably better all the way around for everybody. And they're going to be just fine. Now, the relationship with the rest of the royals, maybe not. But you know what? Sometimes family relationships, you got to let family relationships go or have some distance. Sometimes you just do.
And sometimes the sad thing is there's this sort of, I almost want to say, like when your family tells you not to create a scene, the sad thing is sometimes you have to create a scene in order to be heard. Mm-hmm. And there would be moments in my own family problems where I have a pretty stable family for the most part, but me and my mother have had issues where she's very protective of her image in Mexico because she has a lot of family in Mexico. And just to disclose that, like, she cares about how she looks to her family as like the American part of the family.
Success story, yeah.
And it could be that too, but I don't want to disparage my mother because I love my mother.
Yeah.
But I've had, as a kid, had to kind of create moments where like I was really upset and I had to vocalize that. And my mom, after a while, realized, that's not, the image doesn't matter. It's about my child's mental health. So,
right.
And so I want to be optimistic that this is almost an equivalent to that, like a child finally saying, I've had enough.
Right.
Can you just let me be? Let me be an adult and actually let me make my own decisions. Or, this is, you're hurting me, basically. Right. You're hurting me. Let me tell you how you're hurting me.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this is a moment like that. But it could also just be another Diana where nothing fundamentally changes. And that, to me, with Meghan Markle being at a distance, I feel more sure that it's going to be something that they're going to have to eventually deal with. And the Queen is already getting there. Like, the Queen is not that far off. In a couple years, you could almost guarantee we'll have a new king in a new head of the family in a couple years. You never know. And so this is a time for the Queen to really make a decision and actually like be more supportive of her grandchild. And also just overall, it's a turning point and they have to see it that way. And I
think you're right. Yeah.
I want to see it that way, but I'm hoping it's not another Diana.
Yeah, well, and I think the fact that they got out is gonna prevent that. So that's a good thing. So, all right, we'll be back. We're gonna be back with, we're gonna hear the premiere of the Sandra Booker new single when we come back on the Culture Corner.
You're listening to Bonnie Gilgallon and Brayan Mendoza, talking arts and entertainment on iHub Radio's The Culture Corner. Here are Bonnie and Brayan.
And we're back on the Culture Corner, and we're very excited to premiere the brand new single from Sandra Booker called Until We Meet Again.
gonna try not to cry for you. I'm gonna ask God to help me through and help me accept His will. Until we meet again, I'm gonna try to remember when you were mine and I was your best friend. Through thick and thin, genuine and true. And I can't believe you're gone. I miss your love, and I've got to carry on without your love. But even though you're far away, I know you're in paradise today. Until we meet again, I'm gonna smile when I think of you. I'm gonna laugh out loud and cry a little too, because I loved you and I always will. I'm gonna miss you. And cry a little too, because I loved you and I always will. And I always will. And I always will. I'm gonna miss you. And I always will. I'm gonna miss you. And I always will. Miss you. And I always will. I'm gonna miss you. Until we meet again. Until we meet again.
The curtain rises on local and regional arts and entertainment. From music to theater, films to fine art, it's the Culture Corner. Get connected. Call 760-544-TALK. That's 760-544-8255. Here's Bonnie and Brian on iHub Radio.
Hey, welcome back to the Culture Corner with me right now. I actually brought in Professor Donna Greene from College of the Desert. She has been teaching children's literature for 9 years there, and she's also the professor of children's development courses over there. And she's going to come on to talk about how to get your children to read, but let's first talk about the Dr. Seuss debacle and what it has to say for the greater discourse. How are you doing today, Professor?
Well, thank you very much.
So, first question I wanted to ask you was, what does the Dr. Seuss controversy say about the greater book discourse on children's literature? Is this harmful, or is this a good thing, or what are your thoughts on it?
So that's a great question. And I think overall, as adults, we're probably too quick to censor books for children in an attempt to shield them from life's challenges. And yet, we'll clutch our pearls when someone else doesn't. Right? So our opinions, beliefs, morals, and judgments are just that, kind of our own. And I don't think I have a right to impose my beliefs about what your child should or shouldn't read on you. However, this goes back for quite a ways, right? We want to stop children from reading things we think may harm them. But we want to also provide equitable access to children with books. Oddly enough, the most controversial books, if we go back for a few years, in 2012 and 13, was not 50 Shades of Grey, but it was Captain Underpants.
that tells you a lot. That tells you a lot.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is, honestly? Like, that's very strange.
Well, because in Captain Underpants, the two protagonists are get pretty rowdy. They don't like school, and they're rowdy kids, and parents didn't want their children emulating that.
That's insane. Hi, Professor Greene. This is Bonnie. My question for you is: do you think there's ever a time, or in your career as a professor and dealing with children's literature, has there ever been a book where that was either banned or stopped publishing, whatever, that you felt should have been? Was that the right decision?
For children's books, I don't. I don't think that we should be banning books of any kind. And I think that should be up to the parents to say whether or not they want their child to read a certain book.
You know, and I certainly agree with that. Like, the fact is that I think that in the case of Dr. Seuss, I think it was a situation where parents can go out of their way to buy the book, like on eBay now, but I think that it's the company's right, definitely, to like decide, hey, we don't want to publish this anymore. And I think it's a very complicated situation because some people are saying, like, is this a ban or is this not a ban? And I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think people are getting right, and what are they getting wrong about this whole discussion on Dr. Seuss and the topic of unpublishing versus banning?
Right, that's another great question. And I think what people are confusing is what to me sounds like a very capitalist decision to pull these books and make it public because they wanted to garner that attention and praise.
You know, it's funny you bring that up. Oh, go ahead, Professor. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was going to say they're confusing that and conflating that with censoring. Right? These books are not being banned. They're not being censored. The estate of Theodore Geisel decided to pull the books because they depict some racist images. And most likely because people weren't buying them anymore. If there were a big market for the book, they would have cleaned up those images and re-released them with some real fanfare.
You know, it's funny you bring that up because these books, all these Dr. Seuss books got to #1 and #2 of the Amazon bestseller list. And they're not even the banned books. They're like Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Hams.
Yeah, the big ones are still, there's not a problem with big sellers.
Right?
And I went to Barnes & Noble the other day because I used to work there. And I was in there and I looked at I went over to the Dr. Seuss section because I'm like, I'm going to prove a point. Let me just see. And if it was gone. Most of it was gone. It was sold. And I was like, yeah, I know what happened. And I had heard from other Barnes & Noble employees that people were misinformed that all the books were going away. And so
they just went bought them all. Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's I personally think that this situation, I don't know if you would agree, Professor, but I think the situation wasn't handled very well by the Theodore Geisel enterprise. I think they mishandled it in a way that was very harmful, but they're not complaining, obviously. But do you think they mishandled the situation?
I don't know. I think they could have just pulled them quietly. I think, honestly, if I were working there, I'd be thrilled right now. They're making a lot of money right now.
Exactly. And I think that for me, like when it comes to the money situation, I mean, I think people kind of prove that if you put out a very vague or certain type of statement, I think they're over there like, okay, we didn't sell it. We unpublished some books and managed to sell even more books. So we won in that sense.
And I think,
right?
I think also, and human nature is a lot of times when you tell somebody that you can't have something, they want it even more, even if they never wanted it in the past. You tell them you can't have it, they're going to go get it because it's just human nature. So I think there's part of that too.
Absolutely, Bonnie. I agree.
Now, I wanted to ask you to get to the subject of children's literature as a topic itself, because I always think that because I'm in your course, full disclosure, and I always appreciate a lot of the stuff that is being discussed. So just full disclosure, I'm in this course, so I can't be...
We'll see what your grade is later on.
It's a good grade, I promise you. Hopefully. But I was going to say that now... What are some great ways to help a child read during the pandemic? It's a very tough time. How do we get children to read and enjoy it?
So, well, first, public libraries are all still open. You can check books out. You can do it contactless. I drive by the Palm Desert Public Library, and there's a librarian sitting in the parking lot. So... you can get books into the hands of children for free. Of course, there's wonderful YouTube read alouds and reading apps. I think the best way, though, to get children reading is the old-fashioned lap read. Sit a child in your lap and read to them. There's nothing feels better to a child than to sit with an adult and share an interest in a story. If they're a bit too big to sit in your lap, then you can sit next to them and read to them. For most children, you are obviously a much better and more proficient reader than they are. So you can share that reading experience. I remember when my son was in high school, we read the entire Harry Potter series together. And it was wonderful. We talked about the books, and we very much enjoyed that. So I think just getting books in their hands and choosing books that you know they'll enjoy.
You know, that is certainly the most important thing, is to always encourage kids to pick the book out and have fun, because I think one of the things you talk about in your course is that you just can't grab a book and say read it to a child, and that type of mindset is, I guess, would you agree, is very detrimental to the child's reading.
Force them to read something they might not be interested in. Yeah.
No, certainly. And I think that I like to coin sometimes that there's a certain reading mental health. Like I always said that if you're in the positive reading mental health would be you're reading books you want to read as opposed to books you don't want to read. And I think it's very important to start off very positively for children, not make it a bad or traumatizing experience, what I was going to ask you, what are some ways that parents or educators are doing incorrect? What are some mistakes that they have when it comes to teaching children how to read? and how do we rectify them? Like, what are some common mistakes that you see in your field?
So, I mean, teaching somebody to read is a huge undertaking. Singing the ABCs does not teach a child to read. So the best thing you can do to teach them to read is to read with them and to them. Reading, telling stories, singing songs, making literacy part of your everyday world. You know, we're going to go to the store, handing the child a piece of paper and a pencil or a crayon and saying, I want you to make the list. Even if they scribble. You're going to say, we need apples. Can you put apples on the list? But the things we do poorly is making reading a chore or rewarding them for reading. Extrinsic motivation doesn't work. So if you're doing that chart and they check it off and at the end of the chart they get an ice cream or whatever, that doesn't make them want to read. It makes them want an ice cream cone.
Good point.
That's a good point. It's funny because, like, I remember as in my elementary school years, we would get a free pizza from Domino's if we read like a certain amount of books by the end of the week, right? And I remember that it was about the pizza. It really was. Like, I mean, it's a good thing I became a reader later on, but I will never credit that for it. You know, like for me, reading, it became a thing when I realized I'm just going to grab a book I want to read and love it. And then that's how it was. And just the positive attitudes I've seen in media of books being this cherished and wonderful thing is what got me to read more. Not like these rewards, which I don't know. Like, I feel like it should be fun to begin with. That should be the reward, you know?
And I was going to say, Professor, I would think that one of the motivators to get children to read is to see their parents doing it and enjoying it. If the parents read and enjoy it, I think that gives this kid a sign that, maybe there's something fun about this. Maybe I should try it too. Have you seen that too?
Absolutely. Children look up to their parents. They don't, as we mentioned earlier when I said the Captain Underpants and they're worried about their children acting like the protagonists in the story. Children don't do that. They grow up to be like their parents. So if I'm a little girl and I see my mother reading, in the back of my mind, I say that's what grown-up women do. One day I'm going to be a grown-up woman, so I need to get ready by reading. Excellent. Same with little boys looking at their dads. Our parents are our role models.
You know, and I certainly... I have had that experience where my parents didn't really read books, but they read the newspaper a lot and they read magazines. So for me, like, that's why I don't disrespect magazines, because magazines, I saw my parents reading them and they enjoyed them. And for me, that, I guess, subconsciously put that in my mind.
Role model, yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to say, we're out of time, Professor, and I wanted to say thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us.
We really appreciate your perspective.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll definitely have to have you on to talk more about the importance of children's literature and any more advice you can give us on how to get our kids to read.
Absolutely.
All right.
We'll be back with more in the Culture Corner in just a bit.
You're listening to Bonnie Gilgallon and Brayan Mendoza, talking arts and entertainment on iHub Radio's The Culture Corner. Live from the desert cities of Southern California, here's Brayan and Bonnie.
And we're back on The Culture Corner, and now we want to go into part 2 of our Meghan Harry discussion. And this is sort of the fallout with Piers Morgan and Sharon Osbourne. So I'm going to let Brian kind of tell us what happened.
So the interview airs, and everybody has something to say. Like the royal family, well, we've discussed it where they felt that, you know, they were misrepresented and this is a family matter. So, you know, we'll leave it at that. But on Good Morning Britain, Piers Morgan, the I'm going to say very outspoken, very controversial personality, television personality, had a lot to say about this. He talked about how he personally felt that Meghan Markle was a liar, and that he wasn't sure like what's going on with the situation. There's nothing like racist about what's going on. It's a lie, and she herself is a grifter and all that. So Piers Morgan said this, and on the show, he was challenged by a lot of his co-stars. It's like one of those things where if you're on the air, Piers Morgan is famous for over talking people, like talking over people. But now when he was challenged on there, he stormed off the set and he got mad and said, I've had enough. And he quit Good Morning Britain. Afterwards, Sharon Osbourne on The Talk actually defended his actions, saying that, oh, well, I don't agree with everything he said, but it's his opinion. I support his freedom of speech, and he's my friend. Are you and she said, I don't care what color or what religion anyone is. Are you a nice person? That's what I judge you on. And her co-star on there, well, co-host, I mean, said to her, what would you say to people who may feel that while you're standing by your friend, it appears you give validation or safe haven to something that he uttered that is racist, even if you don't agree? And they had a back and forth, and she said, educate me. Tell me what you've heard that is racist. And the fact is that, like, the whole situation is, it's a mess, you know, in my opinion.
Sounds like it.
It really is. And the fact is that, like, she went on to apologize for it. She gave this I don't know if I would say it's great or bad apology. It's just an apology, you know. She said, after some reflection, after sitting with your comments and sitting with my heart, I would like to address the discussion on the talk past Wednesday. I have always embraced with so much love and support from the Black community, and I have deep respect for the Black community. To anyone of color that I've offended, and to anyone who feels confused or let down what I said, I am truly sorry. And later on, Piers Morgan said that she was bullied into that apology, and he has been very outspoken for a long time about it, because Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan have this history, quote unquote, where they were friends or something. They either were going on a date or they were friends. There's sort of this weird thing where he hints at something more, but I'm going to acknowledge that he hints at it, but I'm not going to say they dated.
Very interesting.
And he basically said, I put her on the Uber to the party where she met Harry, and then after she met Harry, they got into a very strong dating situation. Obviously, they got married.
And she didn't have time for Piers anymore.
No, and he said that she ghosted him. And on Good Morning Britain, someone said, you know, she has every right to ghost you. You don't have to cut ties with you. And she has never said anything negative about you. And he walked off set basically after that.
Oh, that was it? That's what made him walk off?
Yes. The whole, like, you know, he goes out of his way to be very critical of her, but she's never said anything mean. And now Meghan Markle did file a complaint with the UK regulator for the comments on Good Morning Britain, and it was very silent, like, you know, there you go, like. And she also Piers Morgan is now demanding an apology from CBS because he feels they shamed and bullied Sharon Osbourne, who is his friend.
For God's sake.
And this whole reaction to the reaction is a new story within itself, and he's
just trying to keep the controversy alive. And you know, he's one. We're talking about this morning. There are some people in this world, and it's even worse when they're famous, who are not happy unless they're in the middle of a battle over something.
I agree.
And it sounds like he just wants to be in the middle of it. But I didn't know what the history was with him. I mean, I had heard that he has this very toxic relationship with Meghan Markle, but I didn't know why. That's very interesting.
And the fact is that there's been a lot of articles, and Page 6 put out this article that I actually like. The article itself is okay, but I like what was written in the headline. Piers Morgan thrives on the uproar over Meghan Markle. And
absolutely. Sounds like it.
And it goes exactly what you had to say, because he wants this controversy. And see, the thing about Piers Morgan is that I've seen him on Good Morning Britain, and I've tried really hard, because people have told me, you know, he's a big old softy if you really watch his stuff. And every time I watch it, it's like he always is very argumentative and he talks over people. And look, sometimes I worry if I talk over you, Bonnie, but like he does it for reals though. Like he does it really badly. And for me, when someone tells you something like the person you're talking badly about has never said a mean thing about you, that should be a moment to reflect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's not, for me personally, it's like, it's one of those things where like I think Piers Morgan has been given too much of a big platform, and especially for something like this. I feel like Good Morning America, you know, some people have Good Morning America itself is a great program, you know, and nobody ever says anything badly about anybody on there. So when I hear Good Morning Britain do that, I'm like, how do they get away with having a very negative atmosphere there? And the fact is that you can tell that the next episode that the atmosphere was a little awkward, but I'm hoping that this is a more positive situation for the network, and if anything, maybe help Piers Morgan calm down a little bit, because that's a lot of anger. That's a lot of anger over a friendship that, you know, if a woman wants to ghost a man, no matter what it is, I think this is a situation where I have to bring up gender. It's her right to not want to talk to you.
Guess what? That's life. Happens to everybody from time to time, you know? Get over it.
And it is what it is. But Bonnie, you have some things to plug right now.
Yeah, just want to say real quick that this Saturday evening, the 13th, my dear friend Charles Herrera will be singing at the Roost over in Cathedral City, outside, socially distanced tables, masked, very safe, a singer far away from the audience. And then I have, I taped it's a program called Sunday Sounds. The Palm Desert Library sponsors every year. It's my 4th year. And I did a Fabulous 50s show. We taped with Mark Caney on piano at Frankie's. It will be on the Palm Desert Library YouTube channel. Starts this Sunday at 2. You can see it this Sunday at 2, and then they will keep running it for a week. It's called the Fabulous 50s, and I'm really proud of that. It's a 1-hour show. And it's myself singing and Mark Caney on the piano. So thank you to Palm Desert Library. So, you know, people are finding ways to still get their music out there and their entertainment out there and safe. You just got to be innovative and creative.
Certainly, I agree with that. Like, if you have a show and you got to do, and guess what? If you do it on video, you can do a whole production and have fun with it.
And then people can watch it over and over again.
And guess what? They'll show up to your live shows when it's over.
You keep your face and your name and your voice out there. All right, we're going to come back with much more. Second hour, we've got Robbie Wayne from Desert Rose Playhouse on the second chunk of Culture Corner. Stay with us.